You ready? Okay, we can proceed. Officer, or who are you calling as your first
Officer
witness?
Kingsman.
Didn't see you back there. Please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Very good. Sit down. You may proceed.
Would you please introduce yourself for us?
Lieutenant Robert Kingsman, Police Department.
And I take you back to the date of August the 11th of last year, 2020, at approximately 9 p.m. Do you recall that date and approximate period of time?
Yes.
And what did your duties consist of?
At the time I was a sergeant and a road supervisor.
Sorry, Sergeant and a.
A road supervisor.
Thank you.
And did you get a dispatch or something alerts you to go to a location of a 15121 10 mile in the city of East Point, otherwise known as a Speedway gas station?
Yes, Sarisa relayed via radio that shooting may have occurred.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to speak up because I'm having a hard time with your mic.
Okay.
Fan up, I can't hear what you're saying. I'm sorry.
It indicated that Sarisa advised you?
Correct.
And what is Sarisa?
Sarisa is our central dispatch.
And were you traveling alone at that time, or did you have a partner?
I was alone.
Were you in a fully marked vehicle?
Yes,
In uniform as you are today?
full uniform.
And when you got to the Speedway gas station, what is it that you observed?
I observed it looked like a victim line by one of the gas pumps toward the north east end of the line.
Okay. And at this point, what's the nature of the run to that Speedway gas station?
There's definitely a sense of urgency. There had been, Officer Burgle had already arrived on scene, and it looked like he was possibly rendering aid to the victim. And I started coordinating other officers as they responded.
So would it be fair to say that this was a shooting?
Yes.
Okay. And when you arrive at the scene, what is it that you begin to do?
I began to coordinate other officers from our agency and surrounding agencies because we had Warren Police and Roseville Police showing up to set up a perimeter. We had gotten information that a suspect had possibly fled through the alleys, east through the alleys. So basically from there, set up a perimeter, and I had a canine working that day, so I was coordinating that track.
Okay.
The suspect was.
So fair to say that your interest is finding the suspect to shooting that you observed a body laying next to a gas pump, correct?
Yes.
And finding the person responsible for that was kind of a priority.
Yes. Right.
And at some point during your time at that scene, was there any mention of a suspect returning back to the Speedway gas station?
Yes, the events unfolded. There was a message over the radio that the shooter had possibly pulled in to the northwest end of the lot, which is adjacent to an alleyway directly behind the business itself, right off of 14.
And how many minutes would you estimate that you were at the scene upon hearing that information?
I don't recall. It wasn't very long, but I know there was a sequence of events that had possibly had the suspect return to the scene.
Okay. And at some point during your presence at the scene, were you alerted to the presence of the suspect in any way?
Yes.
Okay. And what is it that you begin to do at that point?
My vehicle was parked more towards the victim, which was on the northeast end of the lot. I started walking through the alleyway, which is adjacent to the pumps, and again behind the business where the officer radioed the suspect may be.
And do you observe a vehicle that is, I guess, matching? Are you given any description of a vehicle that the suspect may be arriving in?
Yes, it was a Chrysler 300. So as I made my way over to the northwest end of the lot, I observed the Chrysler 300, and then I also observed another officer on scene, Officer Fowler, making his approach from Fortuna through the alley toward my position.
And do you begin to approach this Chrysler 300?
I started to approach toward the driver's side, yes.
All right, did you observe at this point, as you're approaching, how many people are occupying this Chrysler 300?
Just one lone occupant.
In what position within the vehicle would this person have been in?
He was in the driver's seat as I approached.
All right, and as you're approaching, does the occupant of the Chrysler 300 remain inside the vehicle, or does this person exit?
He steps out of the vehicle.
Okay. And is there something that you hear through the periphery of either through Sarissa on your radio dispatch or through another officer regarding the individual, the occupant in that vehicle as it relates to being a shooter?
Yes, there were several officers approaching the position of the vehicle. Somebody, I don't recall who, said something to the effect of, "Is this the shooter?"
All right. And where were you in relationship to this occupant of the Chrysler 300 when that statement was made?
Almost exactly at the driver's side of the vehicle.
So how many feet away would you estimate?
Roughly 5 feet.
And was this occupant still seated inside the vehicle or outside the vehicle?
He's beginning to exit the vehicle.
All right. And is the door open?
Yes.
All right. And do you hear this individual that's beginning to exit this Chrysler 300 in the driver's seat say anything in response to that? Is this the shooter comment that you overhear?
He stated, "I'm the shooter."
Do you see the person here today in the courtroom that said, "I'm the shooter," in response to that remark that you overheard another officer say?
Yes.
Could you point to him, describe what he's wearing? For the record, the witness identified the defendant, Mr. Zuhari.
Okay.
And at the time that statement is made, you indicated that there were some other officers within a distance of this Chrysler 300.
Yes.
And can you recall who those officers were and their general proximity to the Chrysler 300 at that time?
I'm positive Officer Fowler was approaching from the rear of the vehicle, and then there may have been 1 or 2 other officers behind me, but I don't recall.
Now, you've prepared a report as it relates to your observations on the evening of August the 11th of last year, correct?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to review that report
Yes.
prior to testifying today?
Yes.
And referencing, the third paragraph of your report, did you type something that perhaps, as written, is kind of unclear or inaccurate as it relates to Officer Fowler and his relationship to that Chrysler 300 as you approach?
Yes.
And can you explain that for us?
Officer Fowler was not in the vehicle. He was approaching from the rear of the vehicle. In my report, it could be misunderstood that Officer Fowler could have been in the vehicle, which he was not. It was a lone occupant in the vehicle.
Okay. And were you alerted to the fact that there was a weapon within the vehicle where the defendant was exiting?
Yes.
And how is it that you were alerted to that weapon?
When I asked about clarification regarding the shooter, I believe I asked something to the effect of, "Where's the gun at?" And the suspect responded that it was in the car and that he was a CPL holder.
All right. And did you observe a weapon at that time?
I did not see that.
Okay. Did the defendant indicate an exact location of where that weapon would be?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Just inside the car.
All right. All right. And at that time at the time that statement was made, was Mr. Zuhari in handcuffs or detained in any way?
I don't recall if it was before or after, but I did place in the car.
All right. After.
Relatively quickly.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Cross-exam,
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
East Point Police Department has instead of, let me rephrase it, instead of each officer writing a separate report, East Point Police Department merges all the reports or what each officer observed into one report. Could you please tell me what pages your report, I could find your report at? And I have no problem with you looking at the report to help me.
Yeah, I would have to look, and I understand what you're saying, and when you get to each specific officer or detective that writes the report, it says the case report number, and then it says written, and mine is on page 15 of 28, it looks like, and it says written by EA, meaning East Point, Kingsman R, and it says 148, and then it shows the date and time.
All right, and it starts, your portion of the compiled report of all the officers begins on page 15.
Yes,
To what page does it run? If you could please tell me.
looks like it only occupies page 15.
Let's go to, we've heard the word suspect mentioned by you several times in your direct testimony. I'm looking at, I don't know if this is the same page you have. My page says page of the police report, page number is 16 of 28. And then that's in the left column. And then in the right column is a page number 17. That's the prosecutor's page number for that page of your report. Do you have the same page in front of you?
The page I have here says 15 of 28 prosecutor copy.
There, do you have counsel? I've got my marked up one, but
Sure, if I can retrieve the officer's report. I'll provide Mr. Galen a copy of exactly the report we're referencing. 15, 20.
actually the page I'm looking at is 16 of 28.
Oh, is that the, okay. Page 16 of 28, I have is Officer McNeil's report, followed by Officer Fowler's report.
All right. Counsel, apparently, did we say Neil or McNeil?
McNeil,
All right.
and he will be testifying today,
All right.
this morning.
On page 16 of 28, and could we provide the lieutenant, and congratulations on the promotion, my report.
Here, I can show you what I'm referencing.
I've got that page, and I just wanted to, mine is page 16,
Here's my page 16.
right? Might I approach the officer,
Yes.
Your Honor?
Welcome.
Looking at the continued paragraph at the top of the page, Officer McNeil writes that I arrived on the scene and Sergeant Kingsman I'm half German. I should do a better job on it than that. I apologize.
Okay.
Informed me that an alleged suspect fled the scene eastbound through the alley from the Speedway parking lot. Information was provided that the suspect, a black male, was wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and carrying a bag. I'm going to refer to that individual as suspect one. Would you agree that at some time in the investigation that evening, it was believed that the suspect was a black male wearing a white shirt, t-shirt, jeans, and carrying a bag? Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Okay. Then, later in the investigation, the officers at the scene believed that the suspect was, in fact, my client, the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And the defendant, and I'm thinking about the paragraph where there was some confusion as to whether an officer was in the car with the defendant and returned to the scene. You've cleared up that there was no officer in the car with the defendant, correct?
Correct. It was just as I approached the scene, I observed Officer Fowler, and then I observed the should have been clarified in our report.
I'd like to make it clear that there was no one with the defendant. And the defendant returned to the scene on his own. Is that correct?
As far as I know.
All right. And during the entire time that you were in contact with the defendant, until the point in time that he admitted he was the shooter, he was never under arrest. Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
It was sometime after he declared that he was the shooter on his own. It wasn't in response to a question that you placed handcuffs on him. Is that correct?
I did not ask him any questions, no. And I did place him in handcuffs based on the fact that there was a gun involved. And we didn't know where the gun was.
One moment, if I might, Your Honor.
Certainly.
The defendant advised officers that was a CPL holder, correct?
Yes.
And he advised officers where the gun was so that they could take custody of the gun. Is that correct?
I don't recall exactly what he said regarding where the gun was. I knew that he said something to the effect that it was in his car.
I have nothing further.
Very good.
And just to clarify, Lieutenant Kingsman, the statements that the defendant made in reference to being the shooter and there being a gun inside the car were unsolicited.
Correct.
In other words, you were not directing questions at the defendant in this case at that time.
Correct.
Those comments were made by the defendant himself, not in response to any direct questioning by a law enforcement officer.
Correct.
Or anyone else. No further questions.
Just one follow-up question.
Certainly.
the statements concerning the gun and the shooting were completely voluntary. He was not at the defendant was not asked any questions. He volunteered that information to the officers at the scene.
I don't recall ever asking him any questions. If any questions were ever asked, it may have been very done. But then that was probably clarified when he said something to me. I remember where he said it was in his car.
But the information that was volunteered about the gun was volunteered by the defendant. He gave you that information without being asked any questions, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Maybe it's true.
Real quick.
The next. The Officer Fowler.
Thank you.
Your next witness, is he getting Officer Fowler?
I believe so.
Okay.
He was working road patrol today, so he may have to come in off the road.
Okay. He was here earlier, right?
Yeah. We have a court copy.
Very good, thank you.
And we have a comb down here.
It was Officer Fowler back there.
Well, Officer Fowler? You got
Chuck, did you say Officer Fowler is?
Yep, Robert's going to grab right now. Yep.
Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And put your hand down and have a seat.
Please state your name and occupation.
Michael Fowler, East Point Police Officer.
And were you employed in that capacity on the date of August the 11th of last year?
Yes.
And did you have the occasion to be dispatched to a location of a 15121 10 mile in the city of East Point, known as the Speedway gas station?
Yes.
What was the general nature of your dispatch to that location?
Shots fired.
And upon arriving at that location, did you observe a subject that was injured in relationship to this shots fired call?
Not very early. No.
Okay, but at some point while you arrived, did you?
Yes.
Okay. And as you get on the scene, what is it you're trying to do?
So my responsibility was to be on like a perimeter position, just try to contain the scene.
And at some point, were you alerted through dispatch that a suspect was going to be coming back to the location of the Speedway gas station?
Yeah.
And were you given a description of the vehicle that this suspect was going to be driving or occupying?
Yes,
And what was it?
it was a Chrysler 300.
All right. And at some point, you observed a Chrysler 300 return to the location of the Speedway gas station or nearby.
Yes.
All right. And where does that Chrysler 300 return to specifically?
It was parked behind the gas station.
Was that kind of like almost in an alleyway?
Yes, off of an alley.
All right. And are there other officers working with you as you locate this suspect vehicle?
Yeah.
And who would those officers be?
I remember Sergeant Kingsman.
Okay. Sergeant Kingsman?
Yeah.
And at some point, do you go toward this Chrysler 300
Yes, sir.
and do you observe somebody occupying it
Yeah.
or exiting it?
Yeah.
Do you observe that person here today in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Could you point him and describe what he's wearing?
I'll stipulate to the
The record of the defendant, Mr. Zahari. And
So noted.
at this point, obviously the nature of your dispatch was a shooting, correct?
Yes.
And now the suspect involved in that is, according to dispatch, has returned to the location.
Yes.
In a Chrysler 300.
Yes.
Occupied by just the defendant himself.
Correct.
And at any point, were you made aware of a weapon that was within the vehicle occupied by the defendant?
Yes.
And how were you made aware of that location of there being a weapon?
I asked him, where's the gun? Or something like that.
At what point did you ask the defendant that question?
After I approached the car, I wanted to make sure he was the person I was looking for. So I asked him something like, are you the shooter? Are you my shooter? Something like that.
Okay,
And then I asked him, what was it?
okay. And how did he respond?
The only thing I remember was he said that he was on the phone with his attorney.
Okay. And were you alerted to the fact that there was a weapon within that Chrysler 300?
Yes.
Where was it located?
It was on the front passenger seat.
All right. And was that the only weapon you observed in that vehicle?
Yes.
And is there anything that you did upon observing that weapon?
I didn't touch it.
Okay, you left it where you saw it?
Yeah.
And can you describe the weapon?
This was a black semi-automatic.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination, Mr. Quinn?
Yes. Morning.
Morning.
The- Your department individual reports by each of the officers. Your department takes all of the reports and merges them into one report. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I've got on page 16 of 28, the bottom half of the page, written by E.A. Fowler. That would be you, correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
And it continues on to page 17 of 28. Would that be the total report that was authored by you as part of this investigation? Would that be it? Is that your report?
I don't know how the pages break down, sir.
All right. Would there be any report in addition to what is part of that cumulative report of all the officers written by you?
No.
Okay. The defendant, to the best of your knowledge, returned to the scene of the incident voluntarily. He came back. He was not in custody. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when he came back, were you the first officer to approach the car, if you recall?
Yes, sir.
And he brought to your attention that he is a CPL holder, and he brought to your attention the fact that there was a gun in the car, correct?
I don't remember if he said that he was a CPL.
How about the second half of my question? He brought to your attention that there was a gun in the car, correct? Where the gun was so that you could seize it and take it into your possession, correct?
Right.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Any direct?
No, you're right.
Officer, you may be excused. Thank you.
Officer McNeil.
Please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You put your hand down in your seat. You may proceed.
Please introduce yourself for us.
My name is Robert McNeil, ROBERTMCNEIL,
And your occupation.
police officer, City of East Point.
And were you employed in that capacity on the date of August 11th of last year, 2020?
Yes,
And directing your attention to a location of a 15121 10 mile within the city of East Point Speedway gas station. Do you recall being dispatched to that location at that evening at approximately 9 p.m.?
yes,
And Do you have any special or unique responsibilities as it relates to your capacity as a police officer within the city of East Point?
Canine handler.
Okay. And do you have to go through training, special training as it relates to being a canine handler?
Yes.
And when you indicate you're a canine handler, that means you have a dog that assists you in your investigation.
Yes.
And when you responded to that Speedway gas station on August the 11th, did you have your canine with you?
Yes.
And does your canine have a name?
Ryder.
Ryder, okay. And Ryder was with you?
Yes.
And is there something that you begin to do as you arrive at the scene with your canine Ryder?
I began tracking.
Okay. And can you describe to us how Ryder operates it as it relates to tracking?
So Ryder is certified in tracking with the National Association of Police Canine Handlers. Ryder is basically tracks human scent, and that's what he does for tracking.
And how much training does Ryder go through in order to be able to
So
be utilized by yourself in the East Point Police Department?
we train a minimum of 16 hours a month, max of 40 hours a month.
And so at the time that a Ryder is utilized on the evening of August the 11th, Ryder's responsibility is to detect a human scent.
Yes.
Okay. And is there an area within the location that you arrive to, the Speedway gas station, that you direct Ryder to?
Yes.
Where would that be?
That would be near where the incident occurred.
And when you refer to an incident, could you be a little more specific as to what you observe at that location in reference to there being an incident?
I observed a male lying near a gas pump, bleeding, sustained from a gunshot wound.
Okay.
Further information was that one of the suspects was last seen running eastbound through the alley near the Speedway.
And did you get information that there was also a black male was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans carrying a bag as a person of note,
Yes,
a suspect?
person of interest, yes.
All right. And later in your investigation, did that individual, was that an individual, in fact, a suspect?
Yes,
All right. And, well, let me clarify. Did you get information that there were two separate individuals leaving the scene carrying a bag?
I received information from my sergeant that there was one person involved leaving the scene on foot.
Okay. All right. Now, describe to us now what Ryder begins to do.
So I get Ryder out of the back of my canine patrol vehicle. I hook his harness up. I give him command to start tracking. Canine Ryder starts tracking eastbound through the alley, picking up an odor of a human scent. He continues eastbound through the alley through Send, continues eastbound through Leach, the next street. While we're still continuing eastbound, an unknown resident flags us down stating that a male that we're looking for continued running eastbound through the alley. Again, we continued, Canine Ryder continued pulling eastbound through the alley, at which time I saw a male subject matching that description near Gale, north of 10 Mile, and we stopped to investigate him with Officer Decker.
And what was this individual's attire? What were they wearing?
This individual was wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, carrying a bag.
Okay. And did this?
Matching the description of one of the suspects fleeing the scene.
Okay. All right. Very well. And how far was the location of where you observed this suspect, as you described, wearing a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and a bag, carrying a bag, in relationship to the beginning of the radar's trek at the gas pump?
I don't know what you mean by that.
What was the total distance between where?
So from where we started the track to where we ended the track,
Yes.
approximately 3 to 4 blocks.
And how long did it take to travel that distance?
I would say approximately 3 minutes.
And was there anyone else with you from your department that was assisting you or following along as radar was tracking toward this suspect as you just described?
Officer Decker.
Okay. And And could you comment on, the complexion of this individual that you observed at that location with the white t-shirt, blue jeans in the bag? Were they Caucasian, African-American?
Darker skin male. Again, he was wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and a bag.
Okay,
When we stopped to investigate him, you could obviously see his heart pounding extremely fast. And then again, Officer Decker took over and
All right.
investigated him.
so at that point, Officer Decker takes over investigating the subject, correct? And I guess your duties with your canine radar are kind of over at that point?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
The dog, just to clarify, I took down his name is Ryder.
Correct.
Okay,
RYDER.
okay, all right. The tracking that he did was based upon information that you received from Sergeant Hayes and/or other officers that the suspect in this shooting had fled the scene eastbound through the alley from the Speedway parking lot. Is that correct? Correct. And received information that the suspect was a black male wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and carrying a bag. Is that correct?
That was the initial information given, yes.
So that was the information you were relying on when you began your tracking assignment with Ryder, correct?
Correct.
I don't agree.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
You may be excused, thank you.
Call off, Officer Decker.
Please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
Very good. You put your hand down and have a seat.
Could you introduce yourself for us and state your occupation?
My name is Officer Decker, police officer for the city of East Point.
Were you employed on the date of August the 11th of last year, 2020?
I was,
And at some point, were you dispatched to an area of a 15121 10-mile Speedway gas station?
yes,
And what was the general nature of the cause for your arrival at that location?
multiple calls, shots fired in the area.
Okay. And were you traveling alone, or did you have a partner?
I was traveling alone at the time.
And at some point, as you get to that location, do you observe another officer from your department, Officer McNeil?
Yes,
And does Officer McNeil have a canine by the name of Ryder?
yes,
And at some point, is Officer McNeil attempting to track a scent beginning at a gas pump where a body is near?
he was,
And do you follow Officer McNeil and his canine Ryder in that track?
yes,
And at some point, does that track lead you to a person, an individual?
yes, it does.
And was that on Dale Street?
Yes, it was.
And is it just you and Officer McNeil at this point?
Yeah, it is, yes.
And can you tell us what your involvement is now at the point where Canine Ryder alerts you to this subject on Dale Street?
Tracked over there. I'm kind of following Officer McNeil and the canine just to make sure they're okay since Officer McNeil is out of focus on the canine. Then when we found someone, I began to investigate and kind of question them why they were wearing
Do you recall what this person was wearing?
white t-shirts, with blue jeans, a backpack.
Was this person wearing the backpack or were they carrying it, if you recall?
I believe they were wearing it.
And was this backpack kind of like a backpack as a student would kind of put books and homework in?
Yeah.
It goes over your both shoulders
Yes.
and the bag is essentially resting on your back with shoulder straps?
Right.
Okay. That style of backpack? All right. Recall the color of it? Okay. And how many individuals did you see? Was there just one or multiple?
Just one.
And can you describe your observations of this individual, how they appeared at the time that Officer McNeil's canine tracked you to his location?
Yeah, they were out of breath, sweaty, looked nervous, and kind of fidgety.
All right. How could you tell, or what observations made you believe that they may have been nervous or fidgety?
Just the way they're breathing, sweating. It was quick, deep breaths, fidgeting.
And at some point, did you obtain the identity of this individual that you're encountering now?
I
Through
did.
Officer McNeil and Ryder's assistance?
I did. I asked for their ID. They gave it to me.
And what was the name?
Dave Barone.
Okay. And is there something else that you do when encountering somebody that you don't know for your safety and that of Officer McNeil?
Yes.
What do you do?
We would pat them down if you see a bulge or anything.
And can you indicate what you observed during that pat down?
Yeah, I was in the back pocket. There's a bulge. I was like, "What is this?" Money. There's I believe several $100 bills and several $20 bills. A lot of cash there.
All right. And this, how was this kind of packaged, or was it in a wallet or just loose by itself?
Yeah, loose by itself. Just kind of folded in half.
Okay. And you observed several hundreds and several $20 bills?
Yeah.
All right. Did you give that money back to Mr. Barone?
I did.
Did that amount of money appear to be kind of out of the ordinary in your experience as a police officer for somebody to have on their person?
Yeah, a little bit.
Just the amount of money
Yeah,
was
the amount.
unusual? And at some point, is Mr. Barone taken into custody?
Yeah.
Now, at the time that you're stopping him with the assistance of Officer McNeil and Canine Ryder, do you allow Mr. Barone to go back about his business?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so he's not taken into custody at that point in time?
No, there's not.
Even though he matched the description of a suspect that you were looking for, carrying a backpack, wearing a white t-shirt and having blue jeans.
Yes, it did.
But at some point later, were you involved in his apprehension?
Yes.
And can you comment about the time frame, how much time elapsed from the time that you essentially release him after investigating him and stopping him with Officer McNeil and Canine Ryder to where he is taken into custody later?
Maybe a half hour.
Okay. Do you recall what location Mr. Barone is taken into custody at?
It was in Roseville at his parents' house. I can't remember the exact address.
Okay, would that be 19351 Skyline?
I do remember Skyline. Yeah, that's the address.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Cross,
Yes. Good morning. What was the exact amount of money he had it in his pocket.
I'm not sure, I did not tell him.
Um, Estimate several $100s.
I would, yeah.
Certainly not $1,000, correct?
Maybe close to, hard to say, but I wouldn't say certainly not, but it's probably around that.
It is, I'm guessing somebody in the East Point Police Department counted the amount of money he had on him at some point in time. Would that be accurate?
It's possible.
All right. The dispatch had advised the officers responding to the gas station of two possible suspects. One possible suspect was a black male with dreadlocks, fleeing from the scene with a gun. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And then there was a second advisement from dispatch that looking for a black male wearing all black running northeast. Call that call also.
Yes.
This individual, first of all, was not African American, is that correct?
Correct.
At some point in time after, well, was this individual ever at any time taken into custody when you first ran into it?
Not into custody. When we first did, no, it was not.
Right. And later, you went to this individual's parents' home in the city of Warren, is that correct?
Either Warren, I believe it was Roseville, actually.
South end of Roseville
Yeah.
or Warren, all right.
Right.
What caused you to go to this individual's home? What happened? What took place that caused you to go to his home and meet with him there?
Well, there was a lot of officers on the scene, obviously. They advised that they were out with one of the shooting suspects, and then other officers advised that David Algaroni was involved in the shooting as well.
All right, and that information came to you from another officer, is that correct? Recall who do you?
Not the top of my head.
How did you know where to go to meet a second time with Mr. Barone?
From the first time we came in contact with him, I gathered his information, his addresses, and phone number. And we were able to call him on the phone number he gave us, and he let us know where he was.
He not only let you know where he was, but he invited you over to his parents' home to meet with him, correct?
Yeah, he allowed us.
When you arrived at Mr. Barone's home address in Roseville, he was waiting for you on the porch and invited you into his home, correct?
Correct.
indicated to you that he owned a firearm and had a CPL license, correct?
Correct.
He invited you into the home and into his bedroom to show you the gun and where he kept the gun, correct?
I believe he just told us where it was, and then we were able to go in there.
With his and his parents' permission, correct?
Yeah.
I just have one moment, Your Honor.
Certainly.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Maybe excuse, thank you.
Sergeant Chamberlain.
Please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I affirm.
Very good. You put your hand down, you have a seat. You may proceed.
Could you please introduce yourself and state your occupation?
Sergeant Steve Chamberlain, City of East Point Police Department.
Sergeant, and were you employed in the capacity of a sergeant with the East Point Police Department on the evening of August the 11th of last year?
No, I was not. I was a detective.
Okay. So you responded to that scene of a 121 or 15121 10 mile in the city of East Point, a Speedway gas station, the capacity of a detective.
Yes, I did.
And fair to say that as you're seated here this morning, today, your duties within the East Point Police Department have changed.
That is correct.
And your duties now consist of what?
I am a road patrol supervisor. I'm no longer assigned to the investigations bureau.
Right. And fair to say that your investigation has been turned over to Detective Andrew Wood with the East Point Police Department,
That is correct.
who's seated to my left.
Yes.
And at some point, you arrive at that location of the Speedway gas station.
Yes, I did.
And at some point, are you alerted to an individual by the name of a Dave Barone?
Yes.
And at some point during the course of this investigation, this individual is taken into custody at a location in Roseville.
There were two incidents where our department had contacted.
Now, referencing the second incident where he was taken into custody ultimately.
Taken into custody, yes, that would be the city of Roseville.
Okay. And at some point, do you come into contact with Mr. Barone after he's taken into custody?
Oh, correctly, yes, I did.
And at some point, are you made aware of the property or what Mr. Barone had on his person upon his arrest?
Yes.
And did some of that, some of the items that Mr. Barone had include money or cash?
Yes.
And did you count that money?
The money was counted.
All right. And do you recall, without looking at your report, how much money Mr. Barone had on his person upon his arrest?
I recall correctly, it was $800 in US currency.
All right. If your report indicated $880, would you doubt that?
I would not doubt that.
Okay. And at at some point, as you were the detective of the investigation at that time, was a firearm and shell casings collected?
Yes,
All right, can you indicate where the firearm was recovered from?
firearms covered from the front seat, I believe it was in the front passenger seat of the black Chrysler.
And were you also involved in the investigation at the standpoint where casings were discovered?
Yes,
And a casing is what exactly?
it's the fired shell casing minus the spent primer, the bullet and powder
And,
used in the firearm.
where were those located?
One was on the front passenger seat, and I believe one was in the rear passenger seat. I can't recall whether it was on the passenger side or the driver's side of the rear seat.
Okay, so those, the firearm and two casings were firearms related evidence that was recovered from that Chrysler 300?
Correct.
And did you do anything in response to collecting that evidence to further and associate the casings to the weapon?
The firearm and the casings were sent to the Michigan State Police Lab.
For further testing?
Correct.
And would that be comparison testing?
I believe it's comparison testing, yes.
Okay. No further questions?
Any cross, Mr. Brown?
None. Thank you.
Thank you, you're all set. Your next witness?
And if I could, before you leave, sir, and I was going to go in, I'm guessing you have your police report with you.
Yes.
And that is fine. Could you indicate, do you have the whole police report or just the pages that belong to you?
I narrative. I believe there were some other narratives, but I did not have the report.
And Your Honor, at this point in time, the people would like to admit a laboratory report,
Stipulate?
and this would be pursuant to MCL 76611B for preliminary exam purposes, the ballistics report authored by Shelby. This is Maniac.
No objection.
And this is a two-page report, laboratory MD number MD201772, that a 9mm Luger caliber Glock Model 17 semi-automatic pistol and two 9mm Luger P Hornady fired cartridge case and a Luger caliber Win fired cartridge case. And the results of that examination between the fired cartridge cases and the Luger caliber Glock handgun indicate that they are having been identified as having been fired from the pistol, the same pistol, the 9mm Luger caliber Glock.
The Glock that was found in the front seat?
That's correct, yes.
Very good. Yeah, this is people's
Exhibit 1.
exhibit 1, very good. Will be admitted.
And people call it Detective Wood.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You put your hand down. Have a seat.
Could you please introduce yourself for us?
Detective Andrew Woods, Kingsman Police Department.
And as it relates to the homicide investigation on August the 11th of last year at the Speedway gas station in the city of East Point, what is your relationship currently with that case?
I was assigned as the new OFC case officer.
And considering that Officer Chamberlain was the former officer in charge, correct?
Correct.
Who just previously testified?
Correct.
Is that to say that were you not involved on the date of this incident?
I did respond to that.
Okay, so you were involved in the investigation process, although you were not assigned the duties of OIC officer in charge on the date of August 11th.
That's correct.
And can you describe some of your duties and what you were doing at the scene upon your arrival on August the 11th?
I started collecting evidence, just a basic investigation, assisting with Officer Chamberlain.
All right, and you're familiar with the lab report that was just submitted in the evidence as People's Exhibit 1
Yes,
that contained an investigation into 2 fired cartridge cases and a handgun.
yes,
And according to your investigation, that handgun was in fact recovered from the where?
from the vehicle of Mr. Zahar.
In what location within the vehicle?
I believe front seat, or call it the passenger or driver's side.
Now, if the pictures indicated that would have been the passenger seat, front passenger seat, would that be accurate?
Yes,
Okay. And the 2 fired cartridge cases that previously testified by Sergeant Chamberlain, were those locations accurate, to the best of your knowledge?
yes,
And are those casings that you personally observed yourself?
I believe I did, yes.
And did you also do an investigation as to the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Now, this being the Chrysler 300.
Yes.
And upon further investigation into that vehicle, did you make any, I guess, determination in regards to, or any findings in relationship to there being evidence of gunfire within that vehicle?
I did observe what appeared to be a bullet hole, yes. The rear passengers, I guess you call it door frame.
Okay, and I'm going to hand you people's proposed exhibits 2, 3, 4.
I'm sorry, you said you observed a bullet hole in the rear passenger
I guess you call it the door frame.
door frame. Very good. Thank you.
Exhibits 2 through 8.
Any stipulations as to those exhibits?
Well,
I'll show this to council.
I have seen those and I have no objection to those for purposes of
Preliminary
examination.
Thank you, Mr. Kern.
And so Mr. Grimm can follow along as to which picture I'm showing the detective. This will be people's exhibit number 2.
All right, I'm fumbling here looking for where I put them. But go ahead.
Sure. Now, first, beginning with people's exhibit 2, could you describe what that picture indicates?
That was the vehicle that Mr. Zahar arrived back to the scene.
And just for clarification, exhibits 2 through 8 were admitted?
Yes,
Okay,
by
thank you.
stipulation.
And now people's exhibit 3?
The same vehicle.
And
And
now,
just so the record is clear, when you say same vehicle, the exhibits that are being introduced, these are
all
photographs.
yes, pictures of the Chrysler 300 question.
Very good, thank you.
And people's exhibit number 4. What is it we're looking at here?
That appears to be the bullet hole.
All right, and where was that bullet hole located?
Rear passenger side, I guess you call it the door frame.
And this is a 4-door car
Yes,
with the back seat bench and 2 front seats.
yes.
And people's exhibit number 5. Just another picture. Four. Okay. And people's exhibit number 6. What does that show?
That is the rear passenger seat.
And is the door open and closed in that exhibit?
The doors are closed.
And I'm going to show you people's exhibit number 7. And what does that show?
That appears to be the rear passenger door of the same vehicle.
And that picture is from the outside of the vehicle with the door shut.
Yes.
And finally, people's exhibit number 8.
That is the same rear passenger door with the door open.
All right, does it show a bullet hole or any sort of mark?
Yes, it does. It shows the bullet hole that was previously photographed. that we showed.
Now I'm going to just highlight, let's isolate 2 separate pictures. That's the people's exhibit number 8, people's exhibit number 6. based upon these two pictures in your investigation, could you come to any conclusions as it relates to the rear passenger door being open and or closed upon firing of a weapon?
Yes.
And
Based
what-
on the photograph and observing the car myself, it does not appear that the bullet could physically strike the area of the car where it did, unless the door was open.
And what brought you to that conclusion?
Because when you shut the door and you look at it from the interior of the car, you can't see the bullet.
And that is based upon people's exhibit number 6. So only upon opening that door are you allowed to see the bullet hole. Now, just because you can't see it with the door closed, in your estimation, in your investigation, was it still possible for that bullet to strike where it struck in people's exhibit number 8 with the door closed?
It could not have struck there.
Would you have seen other damage to the door or part of the vehicle had it done so?
Yes, you would likely see something either through the seat cushion itself or the internal part of the door. itself.
And would you be able to hand those two exhibits to the judge?
Just so we're clear, there's no exhibit numbers on the back. Let's,
I
even if you
put
just,
them in the upper right,
oh, 8 and 6.
8 and 6.
I got it
I
right
do
here.
have this figure
Okay.
prepared.
Now, during the course of your investigation, did you have an opportunity to review surveillance video? And also review, dispatch recordings?
Yes,
And there's been some discussion previously as it relates to obviously a suspect returning to the scene, in which was later identified as the defendant, Mr. Zahari, correct?
yes.
But there was also conversation on the airwaves, if you will, about potentially 2 other suspects.
There was, upon further investigation, yes, there was arrests of the other people involved.
Right. One of those suspects was identified as having blue jeans and a white t-shirt carrying a backpack.
Yes,
And that individual was later identified to be a Dave Barone.
yes.
And there was another individual, I guess, described as being a suspect as wearing an African-American male having dreads and I believe a white t-shirt and jeans as well,
Yes, that's correct.
carrying a bag at some point.
Yes.
And can you comment relating to the African-American male with the dreads carrying the bag after your review of this the case and the evidence, was that person eliminated as a suspect in the shooting of Baron Green?
He is not present in the vehicle where the shooting had taken place. The investigation and the video showed him coming into the parking lot on foot, walking where the deceased is laying in the parking lot.
Okay, let me stop you there. We're referring to this person who has not been named with the second suspect with the dreads.
Yes,
That's correct.
Okay, is shown walking into the,
he walks across the street into the Speedway gas station parking lot.
okay,
And if we could, to clarify this issue better, the people would move to admit a surveillance video from this Domino's Pizza that actually shows the Speedway gas station gas pumps. Have you reviewed that surveillance video?
I have watched it.
And does that surveillance video accurately depict the incident that you're investigating the evening of the 11th and that you're currently the officer in charge of?
Yes.
People would move to admit what I'll have marked as people's exhibit number 9, which is a surveillance video.
any objection?
No objection.
So admitted.
And,
And is that gonna be shown on our Polycam?
well, apparently I was informed that if I try to put it on the Polycam, you'll lose your Polycam.
We're not using.
We're not using-
Or your live stream. Oh,
We can, because we're not using it now, we can.
Sure.
Go right.
sure.
Your Honor, may I have just a 2-minute break while there's.
Oh, absolutely, yep, absolutely. Yoga for hands.
No, I'm not used to that. And just
Do you ever
listen.
do this?
No,
Push your fingers back?
no,
With your foot?
it
Oh, I
does.
can use mine. Yeah.
You can feel it all through here.
Yeah, it's
And
just,
then back
yeah,
and back. And makes you forward too.
it's just listening.
Yep.
It must be the way that I rest this hand.
Or maybe we need to get you one of those gel things.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You need mine or
No,
no? No,
Are we able to turn it a little bit more so I can see it? If not, I can come
no,
around.
no.
I know this is big for me now.
Okay, now it's good. Is everybody else gonna be able to see it?
You see
Oh,
that?
sure.
Okay.
I have it on my
Can you
screen.
see it? Okay, maybe a little bit back so that she can see
Oh,
it.
sure. No problem.
Okay, is that good? Can you see?
You know, we can do, you want, we can set this back.
I can see.
Are you good?
Yep, I'm good. I just wanna make sure everybody has.
That's for the webcam.
Yeah.
We need that. Yes, that's the-
Detective Wood, what I'm gonna play through has been marked and admitted as People's Exhibit number 9. Can you describe what it is we're looking at here?
That is the northeast corner of Speedway parking lot. Speedway gas station.
All right, for the record, this is a approximately 10-minute video.
Mine, you gave us.
Put it on pause for a moment so we can.
Sure, and just for clarification, this exhibit People's number 9 has 3 separate files that have been magnified that are titled Magnified 2, Magnified 3, and then just at the bottom Magnified. All 3 forms have been admitted, and for the purpose of this hearing, the people are playing file called Magnified 2.
And is that the one that is, the one that's most heavily magnified is the one we're seeing?
I believe Magnified 3 is the most magnified.
All right, so this is
In the middle,
in the middle.
yes.
Thank you.
Now, Detective Wood, I'm going to be stopping this video at 21:10:03. Does the vehicle appear to pull into the pump that's in the forefront of this video at this point?
Yes.
And does that vehicle have any significance in your investigation?
That would be the vehicle that the deceased driver.
That would be Aaron Green.
Yes.
Shortly following, approximately 4 to 5 seconds later, does another vehicle appear
Yes, it does.
on the opposite side of the same gas pump?
Yes.
And that vehicle, does it have any significance to your investigation?
That would be the vehicle that we found it.
A Chrysler 300?
One of Mr. Zahari, the vehicle he occupied.
And was that the same vehicle that Mr. Zahari returned to the scene in as the driver?
Yes.
And is that the same vehicle that the handgun and as well as 2 shell casings that were collected as part of this investigation and later sent to the Michigan State Police for testing were located in?
Yes.
And does a third car appear to pull in behind the car occupied by the deceased, in this case, Mr. Green?
Yes, it does.
And did your investigation determine the identity of that individual occupying that vehicle?
Yes, I believe his name was Body Butchers.
Stopping the video now at 21:10 and 41 seconds. What do we see occurring here?
It looks like Mr. Green is speaking with passenger or driver at the passenger side. The window is partially open.
What part of the vehicle did we observe Mr. Green enter into?
He entered the rear passenger side.
It was at the side of the vehicle that we observed the evidence of the bullet hole in the door.
Yes,
And did somebody just exit the vehicle?
yes.
Did somebody just returned to the driver's seat of that vehicle, the Chrysler 300?
Yes, it did.
Was that individual carrying an object that they previously did not have upon exiting the vehicle?
Yes, that's correct.
And what object would that have been?
It looked like a book bag or something to that effect.
Now, looking at this video now, we paused it at 21:11 and 57 seconds. Does it appear to be movement within the vehicle that you can observe through the windshield?
I think you can see something obviously paused right now.
Sure, but in the movement is coming from what areas within the vehicle?
The driver's area.
Right, and is that occupy both the passenger seat and the driver's seat?
Yes.
Now, just to back this up again. Right at 21, 15, and 11 seconds. There appears to be now 2 doors open on the left side of the passenger side of the vehicle.
Here's that way,
All right. Does there appear to be anybody that you could observe that opens the front passenger seat, attempting to close the rear passenger seat door?
I can't see anybody right now. Yeah, I saw somebody there.
Okay. And based upon that segment of video, did your investigation, along with the assistance of the surveillance, lead you to conclude that this vehicle right now, the Chrysler 300, was occupied by more than just Mr. Zahar?
Yes,
That there was a front seat passenger?
yes.
Is that somebody on the ground by the, yes,
Yes. And Detective Wood, now, there was a deceased in this matter as it relates to a shooting, correct?
Yes.
That being Aaron
That would
Green?
be his final resting place.
Okay. And if you could, if I'm pointing to a section of the video here that's basically in front of a red kind of concrete guard pole next to the gas pump, would that be the area in which the deceased was found?
Yes.
Right now at 21, 18 minutes and 9 seconds, does there appear to be an individual that's wearing perhaps sort of colored pants, a black, sweatshirt, and then maybe a white t-shirt underneath,
Yes,
enter the area of the deceased, Mr. Green's
Yes.
location.
yes.
And to this,
Can you rewind that
sure.
just a little bit? Thank you.
All right, and based upon the observations that we just observed on this segment of surveillance video, initially there were a couple of different suspects listed as people of interest during the, I guess, the immediacy of this investigation.
Yes.
One being an individual running away with a bag from the scene of the gas pump, and then another individual wearing a backpack, blue jeans and a white t-shirt.
Yes.
These are two separate people, correct?
Yes.
Right. And do one of those individuals did we see in that segment of video?
Yes, you need the second one.
Okay. And it appears that that individual ran away with an object of some kind of bag.
It looks like he possibly took two items.
Two items.
He was there, took something and began to leave, and then came back. That's when he picked up the bag and ran away.
Okay. And did your investigation ever lead you to be able to connect a Dave Baroni who was investigated to the Chrysler 300 in any way?
I'm not sure how they came about this, other than the canine tracked it when they stopped and identified him.
All right.
I don't know where he was, where it was tied together that he was the front seat passenger.
Now, the canine track, from what we've heard, began at the location of the gas pump where Mr. Green was shot and fell out.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
I just have 30 seconds. I have no further questions. And then I'll just continue playing it to the end.
Is there any significance from this point forward?
No,
on the
John,
video?
just to finish the video, there's another 10 seconds left.
Okay. Cross-examination?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
During the playing of that video, we saw the SUV that Mr. Green drives in, pull into the gas station and pull up to a pump. I think it was pump number 2. You recall that, correct?
Yes.
And I believe Mr. Green got out of a, did not get out from the driver's door. You recall what door he,
Front passenger?
front passenger?
Yes.
All right. And of course, we saw him, Mr. Green, then walk over to the Chrysler 300, which I believe was parked in front of pump number 1. You recall that?
I'm not sure the pump number, but it was parked directly on the other side of the gas pump from where Mr. Green was at.
Did we ever determine who that sport utility vehicle that Mr. Green arrived in, who it belonged to?
I was never able to determine that.
We obviously know there was more than one person in that sport utility vehicle when it pulled in at the gas station, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did we ever determine how many people besides Mr. Green were in that vehicle?
I believe that there's obviously at least one more who drove away from the scene. I don't know if there was somebody in the rear passenger seat. That vehicle was seen in surveillance video dropping off that individual that walks over and removes those items. Excuse me, removes those items that were laying next to Mr. Green in the parking lot, and then he takes off running.
I'm sorry, is it your testimony that this vehicle came back and dropped off that individual?
That vehicle is seen, I guess it would be Van's Liquor and formerly known as the Last Call Bar, parking lot there. He pulls into that parking lot. The subject that you see on the video exits, walks down in front of the businesses, and then cuts across the street into the Speedway parking lot. And then you see the video, what he does from there.
All right, thank you.
If that individual who ran back to the station and picked up the 2 items that we see in the video him picking up, that would mean then that there were probably three people in that vehicle when it first pulled into the station and before Mr. Green left the vehicle.
That would be safe to say, yes.
Have you tried to identify who the other two, at least 2, there could have been as 3 as, for that matter, 3 individuals besides Mr. Green. Have you been able to identify who any of those individuals accompanying Mr. Green that night, who they are?
I had two people that I attempted to speak with, yes, that I believe had traveled with Mr.
What evidence did you have that these 2 people traveled with Mr. Green?
A statement from Mr. Green.
Objection to hearsay at this point, as to kind of the detective's knowledge of that issue, as it relates to, witnesses that are not currently before the court subject to cross-examination.
Well, I don't think we've heard at this point that would involve hearsay. And I think the objection is premature, but
Repeat your question and we'll go from there.
yes. Have you been able to identify who the 2 or 3 people who were with Mr. Green that night? Who any of those individuals were?
I have not positively identified anyone that was traveling with him. I believe there were 2 people that were with him that I've attempted to speak with. One I have spoke with. The other I called, driven to his last known address, attempted multiple times to reach out to him, and have yet to ever hear from him.
Have you been able to identify direct examination that the individual who ran up and picked up the two items. Let me ask this first. Have you determined that the two items the individual is seen picking up one, running, turning around after 7, 8 steps, coming back and picking up the second item? Your investigation has shown that the two items were a gun and a bag. Is that accurate?
Well, objection, I think that caused, for your sake, to be elicited based on how the officer would.
Well, I mean, if the officer knows what was in there from independent,
Well, absent, I guess, somebody telling him that.
so I guess the question is whether or not you know what was retrieved with those two bags or those two items that were retrieved, if you know, and whether it's personal knowledge or was told to you by somebody else.
The only information that I would have would be gained through someone else.
Thank you.
What efforts did East Point Police Department make to identify the owner of that or the person who had control over that SUV?
I spent a lot of time trying to identify that person, whom I believe it is. That's the same person that will not contact me.
And as far as we got several views of the person who went back and picked up the two items. The person who was dropped off by the same SUV that Aaron Green took to the gas station that night. Do you have an identification of that person?
No, I'm not.
I believe at about 21:18:09 in the video that we observed this morning, there's another person who approaches the person who's injured before the individual who comes back to the scene and picks up the two items. That I observed that person picking up something next to where Aaron Green was. Do we know who that person was?
I'm not sure if he picked anything up, but yes, we did speak with him.
Does that appear in a police report who that individual is? I did not see that.
I believe so, yes. I want to say maybe it would be Detective Chamberlain that spoke with him or other responding officers that were at the scene. Prosecutor maybe will help me out with this, that Butterfield that was there.
It can be, yes.
All right, you believe that individual was one of the witnesses there by the name of Butterfield?
I believe his last name was
Butterfield. Were you ever able to, I think very clearly that person is shown bending down and picking something up. I couldn't make out what it was. Were you able to ever to confirm that?
I don't know if he picked anything up, but I did see him bend down, yes.
Let's go to the second person who approached sometime, I believe it was 21/16/05, right about that time. That person obviously picked something up, graph. Were you able to determine the first item that he picked up was a gun?
A video, you can't, I can't tell.
Okay.
There's something up.
I'm glad you said I can't tell. Okay.
Yeah.
And then he very quickly moves to exit the scene, and but has a change of mind after about 7 or 8 steps and returns. When that individual then picked up what looked to be some type of bag. Would that be accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And we have not been able to identify who that individual is.
I have not been able to identify.
I just have a moment.
Certainly.
You were at the scene.
Yes.
In the early stages of the investigation, is that correct?
Yes.
And at least a guesstimate, how early were you on the scene? How many officers might have been there before you?
Probably be one of the last ones, because I had to come from my home.
So. You first observed Mr. Green. He was more or less in a seated position with his back up against one of the pumps. Is that accurate?
When I observed him, he was laying flat on the concrete. He had his legs crossed, I believe.
A light colored purse of some type was laying right next to Mr. Green. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And, the person who had taken it upon himself to clear the area of evidence, we know that person got 2 guns, but that person left that bag. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And, I believe you have that in evidence, correct?
Bag that was laying next to Mr. Green.
Yes. What was in that bag?
I don't believe there was much of anything. There could have been a couple miscellaneous things in there. Nothing was significant.
Would that be a bag that a man would likely carry?
I'm not sure. In 2021, things are a little bit different than they were in 1950.
They are, John. Council, sometime before we resume with the couple of witnesses you have, I'd like to,
Sure. Photographs of the bag?
no, I'd like to,
The bag itself? Yeah, sure, we can do that.
I have no other questions.
Any redirects?
No, you're,
Excuse?
and at this time, Your Honor, the people have no further witnesses this morning. upon the court scheduling of this exam, I had subpoenaed the medical examiner, and she got back to me the following day, indicated that she could not be present for today's hearing. She's a critical witness in this investigation in this court here. So I've obviously informed Mr. Grimm of that fact, and we were going to request another date to be given for her testimony, as well as of a Brooklyn need.
You said she's on vacation this week?
I think she something medical
All right, will she be available Friday afternoon?
this Friday. I can call and see. I can
I'd
probably
like,
get
because
back
I'd
to
like to
the court.
keep
Sure.
uh, everybody together as close as
Sure.
possible so that the facts are fresh.
I can.
Are you
call.
available this Friday afternoon?
I never know when I'm available, except when Karen Wall tells me I'm available and they let me out on a beach.
Do you want to check?
I can check. If I
So-
told one here,
Okay, so here's what my thought is. If she's available Friday, I'd like to wrap up
Sure.
Friday. If she's not available Friday, then I would like to wrap up Monday morning. And we'll make it happen.
And I can call her if the court would give me maybe 5 minutes to try.
All right, why don't we take a 5-minute recess and everybody check their schedules, but that recalling file number 205237 FY People versus Maher Zahari, back on the record. We took a break to see if schedules were available for Friday afternoon or Monday morning. It looks like, Mr. Grimm, you're available Friday afternoon, and looks like, subject to the availability of the medical examiner, we're going to tentatively schedule this for Friday at 1, and you're going to let us know because she's going to be back to work on Thursday,
Yes,
and whether she'll be available for Friday afternoon.
yes.
Very good. Okay. So tentatively on Friday at 1 p.m. to conclude. Are there any other witnesses today?
No other witnesses today, Your Honor, and there might be some other items if perhaps to allow Mr. Grimm to observe, and if he wants to admit into evidence, we could do so through Detective Wood at next hearing, such as this bag that Mr. Grimm had mentioned. So,
All right, and the other exhibits, I have 6 and 8. So on the photos, I would need 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. So we can keep all the exhibits together.
okay, and
Those are the photos that you
Yes,
stipulated to.
Your
And then
Honor,
the disc. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I informed the prosecutor that I will probably be calling Detective Swicker.
sure, I can have him here.
If we can have him here on Friday afternoon. And then just for completing the record today, there were 2 individuals that appeared, walked in the same time that I did, who had made themselves available, but I believe were excused by the prosecutors.
That's correct.
That the one was Marita,
Ghana,
okay,
and the other one was Fadi Buttress.
all right. And that's it for today for the record, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Then we'll conclude and hopefully pick up on Friday at 1 o'clock. Do you think we'll be able to conclude?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right.
I'm sure we'll be.
Might I say, after last week, it's a pleasure to just have one attorney on either side. All right.